Hey everybody, Dr. Osborne here with Gluten Free Society, and today I want to talk about a topic that's on a lot of people's minds, and that's leaky gut. Most people have heard the term. If you're listening to this video, you've probably heard this term a million times. Now, but the problem is a lot of people don't realize that leaky gut can be caused by a number of different factors. Most people going on a gluten-free diet don't realize that leaky gut can be caused by genetically modified foods and plastics, pesticides, aggressive exercise, medications, infection, food allergies, and in this case, in this example, even potatoes. And so what happens is they cut gluten out of their diet. They continue to struggle, not get better, because they have one of these other triggers that has yet to be identified. So I want to go through a few of these triggers with you today and make sure that if you've been told you have a leaky gut, or if you're struggling with the symptoms of leaky gut, what are they? Well, if you've been diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, you most likely have a leaky gut. What is autoimmune? Hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's. There are forms of autoimmune hepatitis. So if you've been diagnosed with autoimmune liver disease, there's forms of autoimmune pancreatitis. So if you've been diagnosed with a pancreatic autoimmune condition, there are forms of autoimmune disease in the skin like vitiligo and psoriasis and eczema. There's autoimmune disease of the hair, alopecia areata or alopecia universalis. These are examples of hair loss induced as a result of autoimmunity. Then we have other forms of autoimmunity, the chronic joint, the pain autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis and lupus and scleroderma and dermatomyositis and reactive arthritis and psoriatic arthritis and ankylosing spondylitis. So again, lots of different kinds of autoimmune disease, and generally one of the core contributing factors to autoimmunity is a leaky gut. So if you've got any of those particular diseases that you've been diagnosed with, there's a likelihood that you have an autoimmune condition. So it's important that you pay attention to these potential triggers, because it might help you to overcome the autoimmune reactions. Understand that autoimmune reactions occur as a result of leaky gut, meaning that things can leak from your gut into your bloodstream, into your immune system, and cause your immune system to become overreactive, hence autoimmunity. So aside from gluten, which has been very well established as being a cause for autoimmune disease, as a matter of fact, this has been studied pretty aggressively at a number of major universities. Gluten causes a disruption in a protein called zonulin, which can contribute to or cause the leakage in the GI tract or the leaky gut. But also what we're finding is GMO foods, genetically modified foods, coupled with pesticides. So these two factors here, GMOs and pesticides, understand that things like glyphosate and atrazine and other types of herbicides that are used commonly on crops, especially here in the US, can cause a destruction or damage of the microbiome. And understand that when we diminish the microbiome, when we damage the microbiome, it's one of the protective factors. It's one of the barriers of the GI tract, the microbiome. So when we're taking medications or eating foods or being exposed to chemicals within the food, such as pesticides, these are all potential possible triggers. Now, on that same note, when we're talking about foods, it's not just the pesticides, it's not just the GMO. It also has to do with food additives, which you don't see on this list. So some of the food additives that we know can contribute to permeability, one is called meat glue, microbial transglutaminase. Then there are also a number of different dyes and preservatives that have been shown to enhance leakage across the GI barrier. So you have to keep that in mind too. If you're trying to conquer leaky gut, you want to reduce, or really, in my opinion, you really want to eliminate as much processing of your food as possible to reduce the chance of developing intestinal permeability. Now, the next on the list is plastics. Many people continue, even though they're doing everything else on this list right, they're drinking out of plastic water bottles, they're eating off of heated plastics or eating off of plastic silverware. So you've got to be careful and be warned about plastics. The petrochemicals and the other compounds used to make plastics have been shown to trigger intestinal permeability. Additionally, aggressive exercise. Now, a lot of people are being guided toward, when they're doing their exercise, they're being instructed to eat food before the exercise. And this is where the problem can occur, is if you put a lot of food on your stomach and then go do aggressive high intensity exercise like HIIT training or CrossFit training, you're actually going to create, with that high intensity training, you create a transient leaky gut, a short-term leaky gut. So if your gut's full of food, now that gives those proteins and those other constituents of that food an opportunity to leak into your immune system, causing hyperreactivity. So you have to be careful around aggressive exercise. It's not that you can't do it, it's just that you don't want to have a full set of meal or a full set of food coming into your stomach when you're before your exercise. So it's always best, if you're doing aggressive exercise, eat after the meal. Medications, there's a number of different medications that have been shown to disrupt gut function. Probably the most notorious in my experience are the pain medications: ibuprofen, aspirin, Celebrex, some of the COX inhibitors. So think of these as the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, or NSAIDs. A lot of doctors prescribe these medications, and they cause gastric and intestinal ulceration, leading one of your intestinal barriers, eroding one of your intestinal barriers that protect your gut from being permeable. So remember, if you're on any of these medications, I'm not talking about short-term use like a day or two, for pain relief. I'm talking about consistent use for chronic pain types of syndromes. These types of medications are notorious for creating it. Now, also, we've got certain blood pressure medications that we know can do this, but even more particularly is antibiotics. Antibiotics, they will wipe out your intestinal flora, and in doing so can create again, a disruption of the barrier within your GI tract, leading to intestinal permeability. So if you have a history of chronic antibiotic use, you have to think about this. And that's why, if you go to your doctor and you do need an antibiotic, look, if it's an emergency and you need the antibiotic to save your life, do it. But if the doctor's just generically prescribing an antibiotic just in case, which happens a lot today, a lot of dentists use prophylactic antibiotics without cause or without medical necessity. A lot of doctors will say, well, it sounds like you might have a bacterial infection, let's go ahead and treat it just in case. Look, those are the times where in my opinion, those are bad ideas. You want to justify the use of an antibiotic. And the way that you would do that is, if your doctor's wanting to prescribe it, ask your doctor to run a culture test, or a blood test that would help to differentiate whether or not you have a bacterial infection. Because a lot of infections are viral or fungal, and an antibiotic won't work, but an antibiotic will do harm. So again, first, do no harm. We don't want to take a medication just because, especially when it can create damage to the gut, leading to leaky gut, and potentially leading to a variable number of different forms of autoimmunity. Infection is the next on the list. Now, infection, there are a number of different kinds of infections that can trigger an intestinal leakage. And bacteria, fungal, parasitic, viral are some of the more common types of infections, especially within the GI tract, that can cause a disruption in the barrier, in the zonulin protein, and in the barrier of the cells of the GI tract. So again, infection is another one of these causes of intestinal hyperpermeability or leaky gut. Food allergies is another big one. A lot of people go gluten-free but don't realize they have allergies to what are otherwise healthy foods. I've seen people allergic to broccoli and blueberries and peaches and apples. Actually, I had somebody come into the office this week. They were like, wow, I didn't realize I was allergic or had a problem with apples. As the saying goes, an apple a day keeps the doctor away, but not in this person's case. So food allergies can be a very, very common trigger for leaky gut. So if you haven't had your doctor test you for food allergies, very, very good idea. Have that conversation with your doc. Ask them to test you for food allergies. Again, especially if you've got an autoimmune disease and they've and you don't know why, because food allergies are a trigger for autoimmunity, but food allergies also a trigger for leaky gut, which is also a trigger for autoimmunity. So it's kind of a catch-22 there. And then this last one on the list I put up here is potatoes. Now, there have been some research studies showing some of the compounds in potatoes can actually trigger a leaky gut. So if you're struggling with autoimmune disease and you don't know why, if you've already gone gluten-free and you've already dialed in your diet to what you think should be acceptable and healthy, if you're already avoiding all the other things on this list, you might consider looking at potatoes as the next level of elimination, because some of the research is now showing, again, that potatoes can do this. Now, I will add, there's one other thing not on this list that some of the research is starting to show as a possibility, and that is hot beverages. In other words, foods or beverages, liquids that have a high temperature. And what some of the research is showing is over 102 degrees. So things over 102 degrees have the potential to create a leaky gut. Now, if you're thinking coffee and tea, as part of your, as part of your day, this might be a good idea to look at eliminating these things. So again, I'm not telling you that everybody should avoid these things, but I'm telling you, and I'm trying to warn you, that there are people that struggle, that have consistent struggle. They've done a lot of these things right, but they still don't get better. And these are just some of the ways that you can troubleshoot that. So hot beverages can be, temperatures over 102 is something that you might want to be looking at. And some of you are using bone broth, heated bone broth over 102, right, to help heal a leaky gut. And although the nutritional value of bone broth is very good, and it's a food source that you should use in this case, you want to consider how hot you're heating it up. And again, if you're still struggling, you might want to consider doing a tepid temperature as opposed to a piping hot temperature. So this is Dr. Osborne on leaky gut, and want to show you too down here, if those of you who like references and want resources to go read more, you got 6 medical references at the bottom of this for you. So those of you who want to read more can. This is Dr. Osborne with Web Wellness University and Gluten Free Society. We will see you in the next episode. Have a great day.